Welcome to another episode of the Evolution of Business show. I'm your host, Dave Clare, and I am very excited about today's episode because we have our very first female guest on the show. Now, our guest, to quote herself, is an accidental entrepreneur who experienced sliding door moments that led to her getting her very first investor, business partner, and mentor. And that was just the beginning of her entrepreneurial journey. Today, sit back and relax, get out your pen and paper because you're going to listen to one of Australia's top female entrepreneurs, Jo Burston, the CEO and founder of Inspiring Rare Birds.
Welcome to the Evolution of Business podcast. Business is a series of evolutions. This podcast explores how to stay relevant in the hearts and minds of the people you choose to serve. It will look for the lessons and the failures of the past and share the success of those getting it right today. What is the next evolution of your business? Now, here's your host, Dave Clare.
Welcome back to another episode of the Evolution of Business show. I'm your host, Dave Clare, and today we have our first female guest. So very excited. Jo Burston is one of Australia's most successful female entrepreneurs, and I cannot wait to hear her story. She has launched actually 6 businesses, the standout being Job Capital, which went from $0 to $40 million turnover in 5 years, and has kept herself on the list of Australia's top 30 female entrepreneurs since 2013. So there is so much wisdom we are about to be exposed to from Jo today. Jo has also worked in partnership with the Prime Minister and Cabinet and Office for Women, as well as global brands such as Microsoft, Google, EY, PwC, and XERO. Her most recent launch, though, is Startup.Business, which runs entrepreneurial learning in action programs for school-age children in curriculums in every state in Australia. Now, Jo is passionate about the idea that you can't be what you can't see, and uses these programs as well as her globally recognized social impact business, Inspiring Rare Birds, which I'm privileged to be a part of and serve, to inspire, support, and educate entrepreneurs with the goal of providing opportunities in entrepreneurship and leadership for everyone. So, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome to the show Jo Burston. Hi, Jo.
Hi, Dave. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm so thrilled and privileged to be your first female guest, and I'm sure there's going to be many more after me.
Oh, I'm absolutely. And I think it's just fantastic to have you on the show, male or female, regardless. Your vast experience and knowledge and what I know of you and the time that probably 4 or 5 years now that we've known each other. It's just a privilege to have someone of your experience and wisdom share that with our audience on the show itself. And it's quite funny because actually I often tell people that, and the way that you and I met was I remember scrolling through LinkedIn, and there was an ad on there. They were looking for mentors. You were looking for mentors for your Inspiring Rare Birds for female leaders and entrepreneurs. And I just, I was at the stage where I wanted to be able to do something. My daughter had her own little side hustle business going on, which she still has today. And when I asked her if she knew any female role models or things like that she could aspire to look at, because I think that's really important for her to see other women that she could look up to, she couldn't name a single one, which was a sad state for me. And as a dad, I thought, well, what could I do to help this? And then your ad, virtually days later, whatever, came up. Synchronicity, coincidence, whatever you want to call it. And so then I just sent you guys a message and said, look, hey, are you accepting male mentors for this? And then lo and behold, I think I became the first male mentor for Inspiring Rare Birds.
You did. You absolutely did. And I think that would have been in the cohort that we ran for the PM&C Office for Women. We started that one in 2017. I think that would have been around that time.
Yeah, it would have been 16, 17, I think. Yeah, crazy. And now what's the percentage of male mentors within Inspiring Rare Birds now?
40%.
40%. So we started something. So I'm expecting at least 40% then of the guests on the Evolution of Business show to be at least female. I would like to be more, actually, to be honest, because now we have you on the show.
Thank you. And, for you, becoming a mentor was obviously a no-brainer, given your background in leadership and what you've done with organizations around the world. But it's also really significant that you talk about the opportunities that you want for your daughter. And that really is one of the primal drivers for men coming into the programs. They really want equity for both their sons and women in the futures and their careers.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think it's important, that masculine energy, feminine energy, everything like that, that it takes both from a leadership. And in all honesty, a lot of the leaders I've had the privilege of serving with or working for, some of the best ones, most of the best ones have been actually women. So for me, and I was inspired, like my mother, I always tout my dad as a great influence on me in my leadership, but in hindsight over the years, as I've looked back on it, and actually most of the traits that I have that I believe that are contributing to my success as a leader are the ones actually I got from my mom.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And so, to me, yeah, it's, and I actually honored both my mother and my daughter, and you were part of the launch, I believe, at times. There was the Women Leading book more now, and my chapter in this book was all about my mom and my daughter.
Fabulous.
And the influence that they both had on my life and continue to have on my life. So it's so great to have you here. Wow, like your bio just blew me away. I knew a lot about you and stuff, but the chance that we've had to meet and participate in things together, but holy crap. How do you stay, I don't need the answer right now, but like on the top 30 entrepreneurs in Australia, like women entrepreneurs for like 7 years in a row, we need to know the backstory. So tell us the Joe Burston story. Where did all this happen? How did you get to be where you are today?
Well, I think, first of all, it's a really poignant thing to say, and that is I think that entrepreneurs can be made. They're not necessarily,
Fantastic.
It's not a part of the DNA. I think that they can learn to be an entrepreneur, and that's exactly what I did. I became an accidental entrepreneur. I was working for an organization where I was, I'm pretty studious when I work, and I got to be the managing director of an organization when I was only 32 years old and running a team of about 40 people. And, it was fun. I was learning a lot all the time, but I didn't really have anywhere to go from there. And the business was owned offshore, which meant the directors were offshore. And I had no one above me to help me out or help me grow any further. And I got a little bit restless, and I thought, there's got to be something else for me in the pipeline. I'm not really sure what it is. And I asked the directors for some equity in the business because I thought that would motivate me to grow it even further than what I'd already grown it with the team. And they said no. And I thought, oh, okay, well, that's interesting. I'll sit on that for a while and see what I need to do with it later. I eventually flew to Melbourne to pitch to a client who one of the directors had met on an overseas cruise in the Antarctic and said, this guy, you need to fly to Melbourne and pitch the services of the organisation that you run, and he's a good guy. You'll get on well with him. I met him on a holiday. Mm-hmm. So I flew down to Melbourne. My plane was delayed, and I eventually called his EA and said, look, the plane's not going to be there on time, which means I'm not going to be there on time. And she said, well, that's bad luck. You had 15 minutes with him, and now he's got a full schedule, so he can't see you.
Gee.
And I thought, okay, well, I need to be a bit creative here. And I said, well, look, I'm in Melbourne for 24 hours, so it really doesn't matter what time of the day or night he's free. If he's got a window, I'm here anyway. So let me know when he has got a window or a cancellation. But I appreciate his time is really valuable. It wasn't till years later that I learned that because I was so polite to her and accommodating, she found me another slot that afternoon. And 4 o'clock that afternoon, I rolled into his office. And this was, I think, in 2005, maybe early 2006. And here was this guy, this entrepreneur. I'd done my background research on him. He had started the first reseller of computer hardware in Australia in the 80s, had become a multimillionaire and retired by the time he was 27. And I walked into his big boardroom in his big office, and he was day trading on like 5 or 6 screens in this big room that he called his own office. And something really, there was a sliding door moment that happened with me. And he had a t-shirt on, he had jeans on, he had his runners on. He wasn't a corporate looking guy. Yeah. And I could tell he was like, he had that demeanor of fun, he was, I could tell he was a bit cheeky. And he said to me, take a seat anywhere you want. And I did. And I just walked around to his side of the table, this big mahogany table, and I sat in his chair. And he's like, who the hell are you? And we both laughed. And that was the start of this conversation. It was supposed to be around me selling the services of a business, and it turned into a personal conversation. And he asked me about my background and what I've been doing. And he goes, what, if you're going to do something next, what would it be? And I said, well, really, I'd love to own my own business and run something myself. And if I did, this is what I think it would look like. And I described to him a business model that I sort of had burning in the back of my head.
Yeah.
Now that 15 minutes turned into about 3 hours.
Wow.
And 6 weeks later, Dave, I had my first investor and business partner and mentor, and that was this guy. So the business pitch turned into a new business partnership. I resigned from my position. I never took away any of their clients. I never poached any of their staff, and did it in a very ethical way. And so I had in my back pocket one of Australia's most interesting and successful serial entrepreneurs by this stage, who had run many companies, IPO'd businesses, done mergers and acquisitions, trade-saled companies. And I'm thinking, if I'm going to start a business, how could I not be more fortunate and grateful to have that kind of person in my back pocket as a business partner and as a mentor. And of course, having that in my back pocket helped me see a world of business that was so accelerated and so exciting, and through the lens of someone who had already done it so many times and be hugely successful, that accelerated my own growth. And that was, of course, job capital. And that's one of the reasons that I grew it so quickly. And another couple of reasons were that, first of all, I was obsessed. It was my business. He put the money into it, that I knew that no matter whether I failed or I succeeded, he would get every cent of the money back that he invested into me. And even in the back of my head, I thought, I'll pack shelves in Coles if this fails. I was so obsessed with this business. And because of my obsession, there's an upside and a downside to that. I tended to not have relationships. I wasn't a very good daughter at times. I wasn't a great best friend all the time. But I was working, the longest and the biggest hours I've probably ever done in my life to make sure this thing moved. And I was just fortunate enough that in that first 6 months of operating, I made a call into a contact I had at Qantas and said, I've started this business up. I need some work. I need some customers. I know I can deliver to you. What do you think? And this guy said, well, actually, I have got some work for you. And that was a $500,000 account, my very first account. So that was another really, it's a lesson about approaching people, and people that you've built relationships with over the years on delivery and trust. And so that got the business really off the ground. And then it was just sort of a wild ride from there. And so that's the first part of my career.
Yeah.
And, we won lots of awards and we grew at a rate that was exponential. I only ever had, I think 12 people in the team was the most I ever had. And I was very focused on systemizing and learning how to scale. And back then, scaling was a really odd word. People didn't really use it very much. No. I knew that technology was expensive at the time. I think my first website was $70,000 and it was terrible. It was like red with white writing and I think a couple of static images on it.
Imagine what you could get for $70,000 on a website today.
Absolutely, you can get a whole offshore team for that and do the UX and the IX and the SEO and probably some digital marketing as well.
Yeah.
So I realised that through the experience of my business partner and mentor, he was so far ahead of the curve when it came to innovation and technology. I was being exposed to what he was doing in his businesses and then being able to translate that back into the business I was building with him. So being a very thirsty for knowledge and a highly curious human being, everything I could find out, I explored. And of course, I asked him to open lots of doors for me and get into meetings that I probably couldn't have opened, big, heavy, fat doors I probably couldn't have opened myself. And I think we had a few arguments over the years, but I was very persistent about getting through those doors and he was going to get me through them.
So a bit of tenacity and persistence is valuable.
Well, I think years later now, I think that I was quite aggressive, to be honest, and probably a bit of a pain in the backside at times. But it paid off. And, people say to me now, which is really a bit of a label I've received, no one ever says no to Joe. And, and I don't know how I've accomplished that, but somehow I have.
Wow. So there's J Lo and there's J No. You don't say no to Joe. Right?
Exactly. So I had a shared services model as well. So not just, I wasn't employing my own people at that point. I was flying to Melbourne every week from Sydney. I was living in Melbourne 5 days a week, coming back on the weekends, hence no relationships. And I used to say to guys, I'd make a really terrible girlfriend. I'm unreliable. I'm probably going to not show up at times. I'm always going to be late. So I'm probably not the best woman in your life at the moment. But having that shared services model really was enabled us to accelerate profit too, as well as the serviceability to clients, because I was tapping into an infrastructure that was already there and using, piecemeal time of his CFO, his payroll manager, his EA, his marketing people. So I was only buying the services that I needed to use, not having to employ people full time for those services. And outsourcing at that time was really not something people did. And I think when I look back now, it was really one of the first kind of incubator models that existed, where I had the access to all of this expertise around me without having to pay premium rates for it.
Yeah, and only when you needed it.
And only when I needed it. So I'd get 2 hours of CFO time, or I'd get 4 hours of payroll manager time, or I'd get an hour of EA time, and had the benefit of their wisdom and experience, because they worked with someone who was such fast paced and already very successful, and he had a very loyal team around him. So I tapped into knowledge and experience that I didn't have to build around myself in that first couple of years.
So you definitely were well ahead of your time in many, many ways, or certainly an early adopter of things that today people are just starting to get their heads around. And this was going back in 2005, like 2005, early, 2005 through to 2010 by the sense of things. So, because like today, everyone's looking at ways to scale their business. Everyone's looking at ways to outsource. I mean, one of the things I challenge business owners on, which I've done for a long time, and the same way I'm building circle leadership is what I call an ecosystem of business. So, focus on what you do best and outsource the rest.
Yes.
I think
exactly. Stay away from the things that you're not good at. That's a really big leadership trait that I look for. And it's, I wasn't like that in the beginning. I used to be very, very much a perfectionist, and I wanted to have my hands on things. And I realized very quickly over time that it was better for me to stay out of the way and let people that are very good at what they do get on with it, and keep out of their pathway so that they can accelerate quickly as well. And then even in, I think it was about 2009 or maybe around 2009, I took myself with a group of entrepreneurs over to the Philippines, and we spent 3 days there just looking at every single BPO organization that was operating. And we probably looked at about 15 organizations to work out collectively with, sharing wisdom and sharing experiences together, what we could learn from that and what we could outsource into other countries at that point.
Wow. Yeah, and where that's now common practice for many organizations today. Once again, ahead of the curve is always Joe. So definitely not Joe slow. I'll tell you that much. Joe was going fast. And
Joe on the go.
Yeah, Joe on the go. These are all good nicknames because, in today's world, it would serve you extremely well. I mean, we just had our Business Evolution Summit here in Perth, West Australia yesterday. One of the things we challenge people, if the rate of change, let's give the quote to who it belongs to first. So Jack Welch said, if the rate of change outside your organization exceeds that of what's going on inside your organization, the end is near. And if you look at the rate of change in the world today, even pre-pandemic and all this sort of stuff, it was extremely rapid. So what's the rate of change going to be like in 3 or 5 years from now? Well, it's going to be even more rapid or more exponential or whatever it is. So if we're not keeping up today, well, you're going to struggle even more going forward into the future. So the need to be able to evolve yourself and your organization rapidly is critical. And one of the best ways to do that is to focus on what you do best and just go all in on that thing that you do extremely well. And I always challenge people, like, this to me is the funny thing that we've done for years is, if you're a business and you have an HR department and you have an accounting department, you have this, and they're like, unless you're an HR company, why do you have an HR department? Why do you have an accounting department? There's so much talent and ability, with external CFOs, accounting. A lot of my clients are wonderful accounting organizations, external CFOs, human resource organizations that use it when you need it.
Yes, yes,
You can have somebody in your organization who might liaise with those people or whatever in terms of the person, the concierge of all the ecosystem. But
yes.
why do we bolt all this stuff onto our business?
I think what happens as well, Dave, and this is something that we do quite regularly, we have to re-examine the customer journey of our businesses and the internal stakeholder journey of the businesses. So the talent in the business, what's their journey? And then when I revisit what's the customer journey, that's where you can start to see where you've patched these things together, or where the holes are, or where you can take a pair of human hands off a process and replace it with a little piece of technology. And I think now more than ever, and going back to Jack Welch's quote, if you don't change, you're actually going backwards.
Yeah, you can stay the same when everything else is going to change around you, and the gap between you and everything else is getting bigger, and so literally you are falling behind.
Yes, and because technology is so cheap now and so accessible, and in years gone by, I think we had enterprise software, MYOB enterprise software, and we had contact management systems and CRMs that were all enterprise based, and they were really expensive. They sat in your balance sheet and you had to pay them off over a certain number of years, and you had to be trained in them, and then you had to have a consultant from their firm come to organize your life, and every time you called them, you'd have a bill at the end of the call that was almost like a lawyer. And that's changed so dramatically, so that the access to technology now is super simple. You've got these APIs, and companies are API everywhere, so you can patchwork together, but you can make that patchwork now tailored to your actual organizational needs externally and internally, and you can experiment with it without wasting a lot of money or being locked down into things that are not working for you, as well as getting the feedback from customers in real time to see if it is working for them or not.
Yeah, and I think that's really important to understand. Like this, we have software as a service now, and this whole ability to API, like you said, like to stitch everything together is so unbelievable, and it's not that expensive. Definitely not compared to what it was. And there's still even some of the free versions you can get of a lot of this stuff will do most small businesses adequately. And then you just stitch some things together, and you can create a seamless feel for your client journey or their flow. Whilst behind the scenes, it's this zapping or whatever to that one through an API, which then causes this, if this, then that's, and which is quite amazing what you can do these days. And imagine if you had all that technology at that speed and that pricing back then. What would you have done with how much more or faster would that business have evolved? Maybe it might have evolved so fast you wouldn't have been able to handle it. Like hypergrowth isn't always a great thing either, to be honest. But
no, that's true. I mean, we had some growth periods that were quite literally extremely painful. Like we were just not delivering the best possible way. We were not delivering the best service that we could possibly deliver. I was in an office at one point where I think we were set up for 8 desks, and I had 14 people there. I had literally hanging off the walls, which is not for culture. No. I had them spilling into another office that someone else owned that I knew, and I just couldn't get a space reorganized quick enough because of the growth that we're experiencing. And also, companies outgrow the talent as much as they do the other way around. So I was, bootstrapped at the beginning and had personnel and talent in the organization that could take us to a certain point, but probably couldn't get us beyond that. And they were really some tough conversations, because they were great people. They had worked really, really hard for me and got us to a successful place, but then had reached their capability. And I didn't have the bandwidth to train anyone. And so I had to start hiring more experienced talent into the business and letting people go. And that was really painful for me personally, to have to go through that process of saying goodbye to people that are really, that got us to that certain point of growth to start with.
Yeah, and it's something that we talk about, it's referred to as the paradox of success, right? Whatever got us to basically here won't necessarily get us to there. And that includes the people, the processes, the products, the policies, procedures, everything that we have. All that stuff that helped us get to where we are is not necessarily what's going to help us to get to where we want or need to go as an organization. And that doesn't make them bad people. It's like, thank you so much for helping us to get here, but what we need now to move here is this. And it's And it's quite fascinating. Mark Randolph talks a lot about his time when he started Netflix and when they went through that next evolution of the organization, like the same one that you experienced, and that when they had to let go of all those people who put in all those hard yards and things to get Netflix to where it was in the early stages, but to take it to that level where it needed to be where it's on trajectory for today, well, was on trajectory for where it is today, they had to say goodbye to some really amazing people who put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in the early days.
Yes, and I was an immature leader in that kind of business at that point too. So I probably didn't handle things as well as I could have from a conversational leadership perspective. And I can certainly put my hand in my heart and say many years later, I called some of those people again and sincerely apologised to them for perhaps not being the best leader that I possibly could have been to them.
Like that's awesome. That is so amazing because very few people would bother to do that. They would not have the empathy and the vulnerability to do it.
Yeah, I realised I'd hurt them. I did try and get lots of them new jobs and obviously referred them into companies that I think that they could thrive in. But it was pretty personally painful as well. Like that's an ethical thing that I had to do.
Yeah. So after all this, what was the next phase of the Joe Burston story? Where did it go to next after you? So did you end up selling the Job Capital, or do you still have that? Or?
It's operational. It's 14 years old now, and we're still growing. It's still a really good business. Automated to the eyeballs. I've got less humans than ever in the business that I've had, and profitability and revenue is very strong.
Yep.
So it's a very transactional business. It doesn't require a lot of human contact other than on the sales front and relationship management. The majority of it is a transactionally operated business. So it's a high volume, low margin, repetitive income and contractual business where we're dealing with salary packaging and organising 482 on hire visas for international skilled workers in Australia. So we kind of act as an intermediary between a worker and the company that they're going to work for, and we organise, we're the beaver in the middle that organises the visas and help them with their salary packaging. So once that part's done, once they've got their visa and they start working, it's a bit of a set and forget, other than we have good account managers making sure everyone's okay and everything's supposed to be going the way it is. So I got kind of, sounds very arrogant, but I got bored. I needed some more stimulation, and I had, in my mind, I'd looked at, some of the great role models around me and thought about what can I do with those, both men and women. By that stage, I'd been a member of the Entrepreneurs Organisation for some time, been exposed to some crazy, talented female and male entrepreneurs. And I just started to think about my journey and what I needed in my journey that accelerated it. And one of the things that came out of that was a mentor. And the story goes something like this. I thought I'd better experiment with the market and see what people think about Australian female entrepreneurs and what they know. And I went out to my old primary school and high school in southwest Sydney, Picnic Point High School and Revesby South Public School. And I took a little film with me, and I had the permission for the school and parents and Department of Education. And I sat with these girls between the ages of 8 and 17, and I filmed them and I asked them about their ambition, who they wanted to become as they grow, what sort of things that they'd be looking at that would excite them in the future. I talked about business, and I then asked them what an entrepreneur was, and all of them, every single one of them told me that had some idea, most of them didn't have any idea, told me it was a man that had a business. And that was really my aha moment. That was the moment, wow, if this generation is not seeing entrepreneurship as a valid career choice, or even a choice, or even they don't know what the word means, then we're missing out on this pool of extraordinary wisdom and talent of the future. So this was never supposed to be a business. I ended up speaking to a couple of girlfriends of mine. I said, look, I've got this brain, this idea. I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I'm going to have a go. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write this book about the 50 influential women entrepreneurs that are in my networks and that I know, and help them to become role models for other women and young women. And I was lucky enough that I took this vision to Ernst & Young, Lynn Krause there at the time, who was the CEO of the New South Wales office. And I said, what do you think, Lynn? I mean, this is a game changer. This is a stake in the ground here. And she's like, oh my God, Jo, I love it. I love it. Let's do it together. So they were very gracious and gave me a whole stack of money to self-publish this book, and 2 others subsequently to that, which I'll share with you in a minute.
Yeah.
And I thought at the same time, and there's another sliding door moment that happened with me probably about 6 months before that. And I'd gone to Necker Island and had to stay there on Sir Richard Branson's island. The last day we were all supposed to leave, I decided I hadn't had enough, and I thought I just want to stay an extra day or 2. I just want to really immerse myself a little bit more in the experience. And luckily they had a cancellation of a big group the next day, so management said, please come and stay a bit longer. I spoke to Sir Richard, and I spoke to the team that he had there at the time from Virgin Unite, and that's the non-profit arm of the business. And I talked to him about this vision, about promoting more women in entrepreneurship and having more visible role models and mentoring. And she said, oh my goodness, she said, you've got to go to London after this, because we're in partnership with this organisation in the US who are building out a mentoring program. We've been using it in the entrepreneurial school. I think they had a school for kids in South Africa, the Centre of Entrepreneurship in South Africa.
Yep.
And so I got on a plane, left the British Virgin Islands, flew to London, met with the Virgin Unite team. They hooked me up with this team in the US who were building out this mentoring software, this platform. And then I was like, oh, Shazam, this is great. And it was a bit of a hodgepodge at the time. It wasn't exactly what it needed to be. They said, well, we'll work with you. You can help us make this better as a customer. We'll look after you as a customer. And they treated me as a not-for-profit customer. So I took that program and really reinvented it to fit with what had happened in my own journey. What did I need? What was important to me from a mentor, as a mentee? How did that journey accelerate my growth? And of course, today, you being the first male mentor that we ever onboarded and recruited, can see that software in a very, very, a far more developed version of it.
So that's the mentor platform, that one there that we use for Inspiring Rare Birds. That's the one.
Yes, that's it. So,
wow, it's so good.
Yeah, so we started the program when they were starting out as a business, and so we were evolving together, and we'll be able to give feedback. And they've been amazing to work with. And so when I went back to Ernst & Young and I said, well, I'm building this mentoring thing, and what can we do with that? And they were really excited because I hadn't seen anything like it. And we ended up I think they gave us some money to put a number of the women in the book that I published through that program for free in a scholarship. So that was kind of the start of it, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I really didn't know, what I was doing right or doing wrong, but just kept polishing it and evolving the processes and the product and to suit the market. And of course now, that's quite a few years later, and we've had over 2,000 people partnerships in that program.
Wow, that's so good. It's good to know a bit of the history there. I didn't realize that. I mean, I was looking at it like, hey, this is a really great platform. This works so well. It's easy to follow. It's keep a record of everything. The way you connect you with your mentee, and it's just as a mentor, it makes it very seamless for me. It's not there's no chafe, there's no friction in terms of my ability to get in there, to decide who I want to be a mentor for, and things like that. It's that's great.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that, because that's what we've been aiming for a long time. It took us a long time to polish it as well, to really get that user experience without any bumps and lumps and rusty bits in it.
Yeah, but I think that's like in anything, the whether you call the iteration or the polish, which I think is great. It's just as you continue to sculpt and get it finer, then you put the final polish on it. You just got to keep polishing it to make it nice and shiny, and that it looks beautiful and works seamlessly. I've always been a firm believer: function first, form second. I think form should follow function.
Yes.
Unfortunately, a lot of people try to get the form right and don't worry about the functionality. I think,
I agree.
no.
I agree with you there. And of course, then we came up with, we got to a great place.
Mm,
But I believe the success of that program is the people. The human talent is actually the real success. And
yeah,
I had a realization a long time ago that you can have the best software on the planet, but it doesn't keep people engaged unless you've got great people to help them engage in it.
yeah,
And when we saw the boom of apps and people saying, I've got the best app on the planet, I've got the best developers, and I've got does all these things. I'm like, well, yeah, well, how are you going to get people to use it, and how are you going to get people to stay on it?
yeah. And once again, following human behavior is what a lot of people forget, is that you have to, it's far easier for people to adopt or adapt to something that already marries up with their actual human behavioral patterns, or
Yes,
isn't a big shift away from them.
yes,
Because nobody likes change as human beings, although some of us are freaky and we do like to change and do stuff like that. But human beings as a species, we primarily, we don't like change, right?
yes,
And therefore, if you can find a way that fits in or flows with, and to
yes,
me, like I said, as a mentor, for me, it just flows. It's not like, oh, it makes me, force me have to go and do something that I feel uncomfortable about. It
yes,
is exactly how I feel. No, but it's not uncomfortable. And I
yes.
think when you set up a design that's based on following human function, you got a far better chance of adoption that way.
I found also I've worked very well around people that tend to be quite comfortable in uncertainty. And I
Mm,
do attract those kind of people, although I need the roots in the ground people as well, the steady deliverers
yeah,
who are the detail people who don't miss things that are important, who do the risk analysis and good
yeah,
governance business, all those bricks and mortar,
yeah. I need
foundation.
those people in my life.
But I also really love people that can, and particularly on the front line with
Mm,
customers as well, that feel quite comfortable in uncertainties where
mm,
they don't really know quite how yet, but they know the what,
mm.
know the outcome, and they know what we want to achieve, but they have to take time to figure out the how. And that growth mindset is really hard to find to
Yeah.
employ.
Absolutely. And I think, well, this is where, to me, as a purpose-driven leader, like, to me, when your team are very clear on why, and they love why they do, and that you have your customer at the center of everything that you do, the how and what can and will change. Even like how we do what we do today and what we do for our clients can and will change. Why we do it probably won't, but how and what will. And so if you have people on the front line who are, who embrace that, and then obviously embrace the values of your organization and the unique way we think about doing those things, and we allow our people to make smart decisions and empower them to do that, to deal with it right there from a radically client-centric perspective, well,
Yes,
then, they can revel in the uncertainty. And one of my little clarisms is that, these are the most uncertain of times, but these
mm,
should be the most exciting of times,
yes,
because there's no opportunity in predictability, but there's plenty of opportunity in uncertainty, because nobody actually has a clue what we should or how we should be doing things,
yes.
right? So now's the chance. So having people that you can have who revel in uncertain times is really great for your organization right now.
Yes, and I think there's two points that you made there. I want to talk to you about
Yeah.
that we really explored deeply, and that was our set of values. And
Mm.
we have not. It sounds like a lot, right? But we have 19 values in the business, and
Wow.
we live by them. And when you live by those values, to me that's what's always steadies the ship when it's not sailing in the right direction or you hit rough water. That's what we go back to. But one of the things that we do in our weekly meetings, particularly with Rare Birds every week, is that we select one of those values and share with the team how one of our peers has behaved to that value in the organisation. So a peer-to-peer acknowledgement system
Yeah.
of that. And when you talk about being customer centric, one of those values is that no one thing or person is bigger than the collective or bigger than the vision.
Great.
You don't get egos so much at play, and you get people really walking and running together towards the same outcome, rather than doing it for an individual ideological egotistical reason.
And I absolutely love that. I have my thoughts on 19 core values, but as far as I'm concerned, my belief in that whole premise is very simple. As long as you lead, live, and love those things every day, and that you're highlighting them. And I love what you're doing with your team in your weekly meetings, because the two fastest ways for any organization to bring their values to life, and to lead, live, and love them every day, is to look for where they're already happening, And
Yes.
spot it, go, hey, you see, when we talk about that, what you did there, that's that. And that person
Celebrate.
now knows that that's what that value is. They know you've seen it. They also then now can repeat it. And the other
Yes.
thing is, if we bring our values into every conversation, or start every conversation we have with our values, well, guess what? It'll become part of the, our way we just speak around here. It's just not only how we think, it's how we talk around here. We
Yes.
talk through the lens of our values.
And the nice thing is that permeates into everyday life for people.
Yeah.
We look at and one of the other values is we don't recruit people that don't share our values. So
Yeah.
The people that attract to us are generally very values driven and very purpose driven. So they have a set of core values in their family and personal life that really bleed into what we're already doing and the other way around. And I know when that happens, it's always a really good match.
Yeah, absolutely. I use the metaphor of like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. You didn't get invited to be a knight at the Round Table unless you'd already demonstrated the code of chivalry, the values of Camelot, out in your adventures and your journeys. So I would say, leaders, don't invite people to knights or knightettes, whatever the female version of knights is, to sit at your table unless they've already demonstrated the values. You don't want them to, especially when you're bringing people into your organization, they should already be demonstrating those. It might be in their own words or whatever, but because I always work on the fact from a values point of view, your values don't necessarily have to be exactly the same, but if it rejects at any of your values, that's the whole point. They're like the guardians of your purpose. And so if it rejects at anything of it, well, then you shouldn't have those people in your organization and you shouldn't invite them at your table.
Yes, and a hot tip for anyone looking for those when they're recruiting, a great recruiting question is, tell me about the conversation that happens around the dinner table.
Yeah, great question.
That'll
tell you a lot about that individual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we went from Rare Birds now, which we activated 15 locations.
Yeah.
We have about 2,000 partnerships in the mentoring program. We took that into corporate about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and that was through Request, which was an unexpected product development for us, which has turned into a great runway for the business. We're servicing clients like American Express, PwC, Seven West Media, etc. So very large organisations are looking at ways to harness exceptional female and now male talent within their organisations and give them something that they can hold on to, which is impartial and unbiased to the business and managed externally, but also gives them a safe place to talk about their future leadership plans with someone that is absolutely external of industry and external of their business. So that was an unexpected product development that's gone really, really well and scaling at the moment.
Wow, that's awesome. So what aren't you doing? Might be easier, might be a shorter list.
Not having any overseas holidays at the moment.
Yeah, no, but you did do some work overseas recently to one of my places where I live, which was Papua New Guinea. And you started, I think it was last year, you started working with some female entrepreneurs or leaders over in New Guinea.
Yes.
Personally, what inspired that as a place to go to? Because it's quite an amazing place. Special place in my heart still for P&G, but why P&G? Why the ladies there?
I had a phone call from DFAT and the Australian High Commission in Canberra, and who were working with Papua New Guinea and the High Commission there. And they said, we've got a group of very high potential female leaders and already strong leaders that we've pulled together as a cohort. We're going to bring them to Australia to do a tour of all different places, politics, business, academia, entrepreneurship, and expose them to how Australia operates in those spaces. Would you like to host a session? I'm like, please, I'd love to do that. I would really love to do that. And there were women who had backgrounds in entrepreneurship, in academia, in government and in corporate at all different levels, and some very, very senior and some, in that leadership journey, that leadership pathway. And when they came to the room, the warmth, first of all, that I felt was extraordinary. And I thought, wow, I sat back and I thought, wow, there's something pretty special here in this room. And I'm so fortunate and so lucky to have met these women. And I told them our story and shared some of my journey and things that had not gone well as well as things that had gone well. And, you learn more from mistakes than what you do with people that get awards and success. And we got to the end of the meeting, and the women were like, literally, some of them were crying tears of joy and going, "Oh my God, this is the best part of this tour that we've had." And I didn't realize till later. And so I said to them, "Let's do something else." I said, this journey together has just started. This is just the start of what we're going to do. I don't know what it is yet, but we're going to do something together. Let's see where this goes. Let's stay in contact, and let's stay vigilant in our connection with each other. I didn't realize until I ended up in Papua New Guinea the following year that they got into the lift to go down from the building, and they're all cheering and jumping up and down the lift. And I was like, whoa, that's a moment for me in time where I've had such a strong influence on joy and the inspiration of other women who can themselves make this change in their own country. So the following year, I went back, and that was through the Australian High Commission and DFAT, and I did a tour of, I think I did about 20-something meetings in about 3 days.
Wow.
And I visited we launched Rare Birds in Papua New Guinea and named our ambassadors there. We had 2 women and a male. And as you know from living there, Dave, it's a very different country socially and economically to Australia. And what I guess saddened me a lot was the levels of domestic violence, the levels of ingrained poverty because of unemployment and because of domestic violence. And it really spoke to my heart. I met people who were, for example, running a little business that was poorly funded to bus women and kids to work and school safely so they weren't being sexually harassed during their transport to their workplace or to their school. And because of that, the increase of female employment increases, the engagement of employment increases, and the women end up earning more money, so they become more economically independent and being able to service their family. So it's really this stuff's really grassroots level.
Yeah.
So I went to co-working spaces, I went to co-ops of markets, and what I came away with was a sense of there's so much richness, and there's so much potential and so much opportunity that I don't think it's something you can rely on the government to do. It has to be through the individual agency of change, and that's something that I know I'm very good at, and something I could contribute. So out of that, I met a minister. So I was over in Rabaul, which is East New Britain, and another island, and I met a family there, quite a significant government family, and also a business family. And I said to him, he said to me, "Well, Jo, what do you want to do while you're here besides, you've had all these meetings, what else would you like to do?" I said, "I would like to go to the Highlands and sit with women in tribe and just talk to them."
Wow.
That's all I want to do. I just want to sit with them, and I want to listen to wisdom. That's all I want. So a few days later, and I cut the story really, really short, but a few days later, he picked me up and took me up into the Highlands in Rabaul, and I was initiated as a Tolo Mary, and I was the first female and first white person in about 35 years that had been initiated into a whole matriarchal tribe. And
wow.
Yeah, pretty special. I'll show you the photos.
Very special.
So there's a part of my being and a part of my heart that will never ever leave Papua New Guinea. And I have now an extended family there, and I have a whole village that respects me as a tribal member. So my work there is far from done, and I'm working at the moment with a lady at the Australian High Commission and some other men and women to find pathways to export goods and services out of Papua New Guinea into the rest of the world.
Yeah, wow. That is so awesome. And, it is such an amazing place, and it obviously has its challenges, but I just can't help but get emotionally attached to such a place. Like, it will always hold a place, especially in my heart, for the 14 months or so that I lived there, despite our choice to leave. It's just so, I was really, to know that you're doing work in a place that I hold very dear to my heart, and one of the most memorable parts of my whole life that I would never, ever forget.
Probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been in my life.
Yeah. And some of the most beautiful, loving, caring people. Unfortunately, the bad element can be so bad; it just takes away from everything, and it's just such a shame for such an amazing country. And and look at the history of this, but P&G is pivotal, or was pivotal in the whole war, and stopping the Allied forces from getting into obviously the enemy getting into Australia, coming through PNG, and that's why there's lots of wrecks and a lot of diving that happened up there.
Yeah.
But it was really important in the war to protect Australia, and so it has a strong place in Australian history as well.
Absolutely. And the fuzzy wuzzies were a very integral, important part of military strategy.
Yeah, yeah, and people realize that's what they were called, the fuzzy wuzzies. So Joe, I'd like to get into a couple of core questions here because we've covered some amazing territory, and I know there's more of your story we could certainly, and it might come out in a couple of the questions that we have. But one of the, this is the evolution of business show. So one of the things I challenge business leaders on is, how do we evolve ourselves to evolve our businesses to stay relevant in the hearts and minds of the people that we choose to serve? And that I believe that evolution should be the natural state of business. But a lot of, especially here in Australia, and if not in West Australia, there's been this strong growth mindset. We got to grow, just got to keep growing our business. And I think that's gotten a lot of people into trouble, getting just such a growth mindset. They get focused on growing, and we grow into obscurity or irrelevance or fade away into the sunset. How do you discern the difference between growth and evolution?
I had a really good think about this because I thought it was a brilliant question.
Thank you.
Growth to me is something that's quite measurable and directional. So it's a change in a number or a change in a size, and it could be incremental or fast growth. But to me, it's something you can measure. You can measure your height, you can measure your weight, you can measure your P&L, you can measure your cash flow. They're all measurables, and those things grow. I think evolution is non-directional in the fact that it's more of an incremental change, and it can happen without you actually even noticing. The other thing, I think it can be self-paced, or it could be biologically paced, and it doesn't have a measuring system.
Yeah, very cool. That is a great description. I just interviewed on this podcast, the previous episode was Steve Rogers, not Captain America, but Steve Rogers of the United States, and he's doing a lot of work in the purpose-driven space. And he had a very similar answer, but his metaphor or analogy that he used for it, which was really cool, is kind of like evolution is upgrading your operating system.
Yes.
And whereas growth is about adding new apps, or you might be putting in new apps into your programs or new programs in, but evolution is actually upgrading the whole operating system of your business or your mindset.
I think the analogy I'll share with you is, and this is really a bit kitschy, but if I look at a tree, the tree grows,
yes.
The size of the trunk grows, the branches grow, the number of leaves grow, the number of flowers, the number of fruit it produces, that can all grow, or it can diminish, but growth is growth. Evolution to me is that tree becoming something else that's not a tree.
Wow, like a forest?
It becomes something else completely different that doesn't start the way that it looked in the first place. And of course, if you look at biological evolution, and I'm a believer of that's a great example where, one little thing becomes something with legs and wings later.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, that's I guess is when the caterpillar becomes the butterfly, is that growth or is that evolution?
Yeah.
I mean, that's evolution, right? It's
evolved.
evolved.
Yes.
And I think this is so important for us as leaders that a lot of business owners and leaders, and I'm not sure from your experience, but I find that they think, because I'm the business owner or leader, I don't need to grow or evolve, but my team does, and I need to, everyone else needs to grow and evolve because I own the business. So why do I need to grow? But what certainly a lot of my clients have found these days is the more that they evolve, they create capacity and space in their organization for their team to evolve, which means then their organization can evolve, and that means we can stay relevant in the hearts and minds of people we choose to serve. But this.
Yes.
Whether it's an ego position or whatever, or I think we've been told for so many years that, if you want to grow your business, grow your people.
Yes.
But that says that you don't need to grow, or you don't need to evolve.
Yes, and I'm with you on that. I don't agree. And I think you said before, if that talked about Jack Welch, and if you're as a leader not prepared to change and evolve, then you're leading by example. So it's very difficult to say to people that you're surrounded with, I want you to evolve and I want you to change, but you're not willing to do it yourself. I probably wouldn't work with someone that did that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But unfortunately, there's a lot of those people out there. Now, it's also fascinating in the world that we're in today, Joe. And then this is, if you look at the leadership style, whatever you had prior to this pandemic, COVID, whatever you want to call it, and people all working in your office today, people either working remotely or a distributed work pattern, you're going to need to upgrade your leadership operating system, because how you lead into that world, well, everyone's in a rush for everything to go back to the way it was, which is great. But even if you go back to where you were, you're not going to move forward the way you were. And so how you choose to move forward now, you need to evolve yourself in the way you think and stuff that you do as a leader, because the future of work, the future of leadership is going to be different. And if you're not willing to evolve and shift your thinking in that space and become the butterfly out of the caterpillar that you were.
You're going to be a dead duck.
Eh?
You're going to be a dead duck otherwise.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about what was your most significant personal evolution, and you reflect on your own life, whether personal as a leader or just in your own life. I'm sure there's been many, but what would you see as the most significant personal evolution that you've gone through?
I think there's probably a couple that stand out, and that is giving myself permission to say yes and figure it out later. And
Not Joe, no, it's Joe, yes.
Yeah, not always having the answers, but knowing that I can work out what they are and find them. And that takes a fair bit of self-esteem, but it also that's someone who backs themselves. I don't know the answer, but I'll find it out. And surrounding myself with wisdom and knowledge continuously without judgment. I think that's a big evolution that I had later on. I think in my earlier days, I was very transactional as a leader because I was running a very transactional business, and with growth being very transactional. I think now the evolution for me has been becoming more human-centric in a very big way. Wow. Looking at Inspiring Rare Birds, and of course Startup Business, my educational business, they're 100% successful because of the humans.
Wow.
And empowering, and I think that it's a bit of a shitty word, but empowering humans to become their own agency of their own changes as well, and letting go of the reins and knowing that perfection is not as important as progression.
Yeah, that's such an important one. But if people truly understood the concept of perfection is a direction, not a destination.
Yes.
So if you understand that, then progression is what matters most anyway.
Yes.
Because what's perfect today may not be perfect tomorrow.
Yes. And I think the other area I really evolved is I think I became not just so much more honest with myself, but honest with other people about what I was capable of doing and what I was incapable of doing, and where I see things that I'm not very good at doing. I had to have that conversation with myself to say, you might be the leader, but you don't need to wear all of these hats. And some of the hats are best worn with other people. And because I've been able to then surround myself with people that are better at what they do than what I can possibly deliver myself, and keeping my hands away from them, letting them run really hard with what they have. And I learn so much from those people. And that is, being open and honest with myself about knowing I can learn so much from other people, and keeping quiet and listening intently without judgment.
Yeah, and I think that's an amazing talent to develop. And so to me, it sounds like you've certainly become, not you weren't authentic in terms of, but vulnerable and open and honest. And once again, which doesn't mean that you weren't that before, but you've allowed yourself to be exposed to be open and honest and vulnerable. Yes. To these things. And I think, which is a wonderful character trait to have in the world today, because in a world where technology and everything else is trying to take over, showing that you're human is very powerful.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable saying to my teams, oh, I was really wrong. I got that wrong. You were actually on the right track there, and I went down the wrong pathway. Or, you asked me to help you out with that. And you know what? I actually completely forgot. I really didn't. It probably wasn't my priority, but I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
And that to me is honesty. That's not transparency. That's just being truthful.
Yeah, no, and I think that's to your own truth, and so that everyone else can see it. I think no longer do we have to live in a world where the boss has the best idea. The best idea wins, not the boss's idea.
Mm.
This is what we should be concerned with, and that surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. I've always said as a leader, there's two things. There's stuff I need to know, and there's stuff I need to understand. And the only thing that I must know is who knows.
Yes, yes.
And the rest I just need to understand. Now, there's not much stuff I could know and everything like that, but if there's only one thing I need to know, and that's who knows. So if I surround myself with people who are capable and talented, I just need to know who they are and what they do, and I just need to understand how it all works together. Outside of that, what else do I need to know?
Yes.
Of human behavior and human beings, and how to help them become the best versions of themselves so they can do their life's best work, whether in my care and beyond.
Yes,
Yeah.
I agree. And I always agree. I always think that honesty over transparency wins.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about what was the most significant business evolution you feel in your time and all the businesses that you've had. Would you be able to highlight one significant business evolution where you non-directional self or biologically enhanced your business?
Yes, and it's probably one of the hardest things I've ever tried to achieve, and that is creating a community of practice. That is bringing people together from all different silos and all different backgrounds and all different cultural origins and gender, and having them share a single vision and believe in it strongly. So for an example, I talked about Rare Birds earlier.
Yeah.
I got corporate world involved really early, and I thought, if I can get them involved, who else can I get involved? Who else can I share this story with? And of course, I went to academia, and I spoke to the University of Sydney Business School, who ended up, one of the professors there became a business partner of mine in another organisation later. And I realised that this thing that we were doing with women and making entrepreneurship accessible, and with the support that we were offering in the programs, it was a common thread across government, academia, industry, and general communities. And by bringing all of those people together into one space where they could connect as equals and we can acknowledge each other's differences, I didn't bring the silos down, but I punched pretty big holes in them. And I realised that it's okay that we all think differently, and that diversity of thinking is actually truly valuable. So I made sure in those conversations in the early days that no one was being excluded. Everyone was being included in all conversations, and all opinions were validated, because they all had different needs and different things and levers they had to pull in their own environments. So when I got to the point of, launching the organisation in 15 regional areas across Australia, from Karratha in Western Australia to Tasmania, and everybody singing the same tune, I was like, whoa, this is very powerful, and I've got a huge responsibility about how I lead this. But that was extraordinarily transformational for me and evolutionary for me. And I guess the word is the evolvement of myself through that process meant that it was clear to me that I had built a vision that was strong and that resonated and people could connect with, but it's not necessarily me that's doing the work. I want to celebrate the people like yourself, Dave, who was our first male mentor. We opened up, we launched in Canberra with Julie Bishop and Michael McCormick, Minister McCormick at the time, who's now the Deputy Prime Minister, and they were singing the tune, and I'm like, oh my God, I've built something here that's really special, and that's because built it in a community of practice.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. I love that, transformational and diversity. I think it's really cool that you talk about that, because to me, I've always challenged people. What I believe diversity to be is diversity of thought. Certainly there's diversity of race, creed, religion, color, sexual preference, all that sort of stuff. I respect that. But to me, I want a scientist, an artist, a philosopher, a pragmatist, a spiritualist, a whatever thinkers, masculine thinker, feminine thinker. I want all of those together, and all them looking at that same opportunity or challenge or problem through all their own individual lenses. And imagine what amazing things we could pull out together in a collaboration. Because to me, collaboration, a lot of people confuse that with teamwork or working together. Collaboration is when there's no logos or egos on the table, and we're all here for the greater good, and nobody gives a crap who gets the credit for it.
And one of the tips I would give to particularly entrepreneurial business owners is in the early stages to form advisory boards that do have that diversity of thinking. So you don't necessarily want to surround yourself with people that look like and sound like yourself. You want to surround yourself with people that have knowledge that you don't own yet. And, you know, people sit on mountains of wisdom without even really knowing it. And so when we formed the first advisory board for Inspiring Rare Birds, I had an academic on the board, I had a corporate leader on the board, I had a serial entrepreneur on the board, I had a mix of men and women to get that, you know, the different thinking, feminine, masculine thinking. But what I used to, the knowledge I used to come away with from those meetings was just like mind-blowing. So I'd sit there and go, oh my God, I'm so lucky. I can't afford to employ any of these people. And now I've got them all sitting at my dining room at home, feeding them, you know, a nice meal and having some nice wine, and there's bags of knowledge and gold nuggets are flying all over the place, and I get to be the lucky recipient of that.
Yeah, how amazing. And we've got two more questions I need to ask you before we wrap up. First one is the future. What do you see in terms of work, leadership, human technology? Like, what are you seeing, or what aren't you seeing that you're looking for, that you would give people advice about, you know, or the people in your networks, that, you know, this is what your thoughts are about what's coming?
Well, I think, first of all, flexible working arrangements were something that were debated for how many years now? Years and years.
I can't have my people work from home. It's just not going to work.
Although, you know, insurance problems, etc. And now everyone loves it because it was forced. There was no choice. So all of a sudden those early adapters are going, see, I told you so. And the naysayers are saying, oh, actually, this is not so bad. So I guess the silver lining for me is that when people are under extreme adversity, it's where the greatest innovations occur and the greatest thinking and change occurs. So I'm hoping that I'm going to look forward and see lots of social change and change that's forced, rather than people sitting on the fence and sort of going one way or the other for too long. And that, I mean, that's a very basic example.
Yeah, but it's still a powerful one, I assure you.
It's so powerful. I'm also seeing people become their own agencies of change more often. And I like the fact that CEOs can talk about how they feel and be humanized. And that didn't happen even 5 years ago. Still doesn't happen in some companies.
No.
But because of this remote working environment, and you can see someone's kid in the background, or you can see that their pot plant's dead, or you can see that the dog's, you know, running around barking.
Yeah.
People have been humanized by that process. And I think that's going to lead to something really good as well for us. I don't think you can come back from that. I don't think you can go back to the, you know, I'm wearing the Superman suit when I walk out of the lift every morning.
Some might be wearing it at home.
I'm sure they are.
But if you look at Australia, the consumer trust index with CEOs of large corporations in Australia has been on a significant decline over the years. So hopefully maybe this humanization of CEOs, leaders of organizations, and this, you know, showing the human side of everyone might actually help build that trust back up, which can be a wonderful thing for organizations, and then build trust back in those organizations themselves.
Yes, yeah. I think so. Over the next 3 years, our organisation in particular, we shut our lease down on an office, the office that you visited a couple of times.
Yeah.
Closed that down pretty quickly and thought, why do we need an office? I've got a beautiful terrace in the city in the rocks, so we've converted that into our new hotspot, so that anyone in the team can go there and work from there whenever they want to. And we took a vote across the businesses and said, who wants a stable office or who wants to work at home? Because all the answers are right and all the answers are yes. And the majority wanted to continue working at home. So that is our, I hate that new norm sort of phrase thing, but that's our future. And we'll do that continuously unless something changes, which I can't see it really changing. People are working more productively. They're more engaged with their families and their friends. They've got no travel time, which cuts out, for some people, 2 hours a day of...
Yeah, especially in Sydney.
2 hours a day of quality human time that they could be having with their children or their partner, or somebody else, but we've also made this space in the city so that because we have people that work with us that don't have anyone else, and they're not in a partnership or they don't have children, and then they still need that, that essence of human contact and that the vibrancy of those ad hoc conversations and eating a meal with someone else. And so I think we'll see what happens, but I think we've got the combination pretty right. But again, we'll work out how we change it as we go.
Yeah, and I think going from everyone working in the office to remote working to what will be more a distributed sense of working, whether it's some at work, some at home, and there's obviously some roles where they have to show up to the workplace. I respect that. But when I just think now the increased flexibility and the distribution of working from a cafe, from your home office, from down wherever it is. One of my buddies, he's got a SEO company here, probably the top SEO company in Australia, and they're a web developer. They have just websites for their clients. Even pre-COVID times, she was sitting on a beach in Mexico building the most amazing websites in their organization. And I was thinking, like how cool is that? And people are like, oh no, you can't have people work from home. And now everyone realizes you can, And so our personal and professional biases are irrelevant. And, beliefs are just those things that served us at a certain time. And hopefully people's got new beliefs now that can serve us going forward.
I think the other change we'll see as well, Dave, is you're seeing people transition out of very long careers with certain skills into very different spaces. And I think we saw a great example of that of Qantas workers transitioning into, for example, Woolworths. I think that's going to bring really new insights to those businesses because they're not tainted by and I say that in a nice way, they're not tainted by the organisation, mechanic and culture as it stands. They're coming from somewhere perhaps with a different culture and a different way of thinking. So again, I think the upside there is that we're going to see businesses innovate because they're getting a new type of talent into the organisation that they probably didn't recognise or look at before as a potential hire.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point. Like, can you imagine someone who's trained at Qantas in terms of customer service and customer experience and everything like that, plus knows how to organize and deal with stress and pressure and things that you do on the airlines, and all of a sudden putting them into a Coles or Woolies? What might the shopping experience, consumer experience be like if you're served by an air steward in a Coles or a Woolies?
Yes.
And from a competition point of view, talk about creating what's beyond customer experience and creating, guided transformation in organizations. I think that's what I'm looking forward to see. Everyone moving beyond just creating an experience for their customers to creating this guided sense of transformation where people fall in love with why they do what they do, and that shopping or doing is a compelling and exciting experience.
Yes.
Even the most mundane things.
Yes, I think the last change that we might see is not right now, but I think we'll see growth in small business startups and ownership. So when people are at home and that, I think they've had to become a little bit more resourceful. And for those unfortunate that have not been employed or lost their jobs, they've still got incredible skills that can be applied into creating a small business. So I hope that we see some growth in that space in the future.
Yeah, I really hope that some people who are working in a job that they weren't really happy in, but they're getting paid and they had the trappings of success and I had mortgages and all this stuff to pay for, but I was in a job that was making me miserable, who may have, with great empathy, appreciate they've lost that or may have lost that opportunity now, but have a chance now to go and do something that they're really excited about, either start their own thing, if you ever wanted to, but you were unable to do so because you weren't willing to let go. Well, guess what? You might have get the wake-up call that you were looking for. And in 2 to 3 years' time, we might look back at this and say this was the best of times. It forced me to make the changes that I was afraid to make or wasn't willing to let go of.
So that's the change and involvement that we're talking about. It's forced through adversity, and you have to do something. You can't sit on the fence anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So my last question for you, Joe, is a random one. So I have 1 to 31 questions written down here. You don't get to see what they are. You get to pick a number between 1 and 31, but you must answer the question.
27.
27, straight into it. Oh, okay. One of my favorite questions. And I
say that all the time.
Okay, no one's picked 27 yet, so this will be great. Do pineapples belong on a pizza, and why not? Yes.
No deal. Absolutely no deal. I cannot stand fruit with savory food.
Yeah, like honestly, is it a dessert or is it like when you start putting pineapples on it, I don't know. And the sad part for me as a Canadian is I believe that the ham and pineapple pizza was actually created in Canada. So we have a lot to explain for that, but I don't, thank you.
Worst combination ever. You couldn't pay me to eat that. But I think there's a question that you need to add on there that I'd like to give you, which is another food question, because we had this debate last night at the table.
Yep.
That was, what is the correct way to stack a taco?
Oh, great question.
So do you put the cheese and the meat on the bottom, or do you put the salad on the bottom?
I actually put the cheese on it, because if I put the meat on it, it melts the cheese.
Right. So I've got someone in this house that swears by the other way around, has to put the salad and the guacamole on the bottom, then the meat, and then the chease.
No, so if I put it all in there, then I leave very little room for the salad, so I can have all the meat and cheese. Okay. That is a great question, though. And since my son is a big taco fan, I'll have to ask him that question. We'll have the great taco debate. If people want to get hold of you, Joe, find out more about Inspiring Rare Birds, the other things that you're doing, your books, everything like that, where's the best way for them to get hold of you?
The best way is www.inspiringrarebirds.com, and I'm more than happy to provide my LinkedIn profile for you, Dave, if anyone wants to grab me through that.
Beautiful. I'll put that in the show notes so that people can connect with you there. I'll be tagging you in anyway when we post it up on the LinkedIn as well.
And I try to be a really accessible leader, so happy for my email address to be distributed.
Thank you so much for that. And as a shout out at the very end, anybody out there who is really passionate about helping female entrepreneurs, business owners, leaders, I believe you guys are still looking for more mentors right now for Inspiring Rare Birds.
Yes, we have another 2 programs in pipeline, and those cohorts are due to start in the next few months. So we're always looking for amazing people that are sitting on loads of knowledge and wisdom. Even if you think you're not, you probably are.
Yeah, and so I've also encouraged many of the men out there to please don't think just because you're a man that you can't support. Please do so. It's been one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done, not only for me personally in terms of being able to do the things I said I would do to support my daughter, but the amazing ladies that I've been able to, and I reckon I've learned equally as much, if not more, from them than I've hopefully imparted or challenged their thinking in that space. It's really helped me to understand a lot more about that and about myself. So it's been an absolute gem of a thing that I've been able to do. And I selfishly think I've taken more than I've given. But it's been a wonderful experience, and I look forward to continuing to do so. So thank you so much for jumping onto the Evolution of Business show, Joe. It's been really inspirational, which is no surprise, knowing yourself. And really look forward to when we can fly again and catch up the next time I get to Sydney, catching up, or if you're back over to WA. And if we're going to Papua New Guinea again, let me know.
Oh, I will. I'm planning to go next year, so I'll give you the heads up when we're going, because my partner's a mad spear fisherman. He's actually out looking for a bluefin tuna today because they're in season. So hopefully,
nice. Yeah, he's a great hunter, your partner, isn't he?
Yes, he's quite a warrior. So he's a bit caveman. He goes out with a bow and arrow or a spear gun, and then he comes home and throws something on the kitchen bench.
That's amazing. But that would be the type of man that you would have in your life. It's fantastic. Thanks again, Joe.
Thanks so much, Dave. I'll talk to you real soon, and I'll make sure I get some great women on the show for you.
Yes, thank you. That would be awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.
Cheers.